Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry we missed another, we had another gap last week. It was circumstances beyond my control. But we're glad to be back this week. But that kind of also then segmented the study department's lecture on attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime into a 2-week consecutive kind of thing. And so I'm going to go off in not in a parallel direction, okay? Because what happened last Wednesday, I got contacted by my new friend, Mr. CB, who let me know that, hey, by the way, there's a volume 6.
Oh.
Okay? And so, did you know that? No, I had looked. I had specifically looked. In fact, I couldn't find it until I actually looked for it and put in, Teachings for Victory, Volume 6, and I finally got a hit because I went back to the SGI USA bookstore and I couldn't find it even after he told me. So I thanked him, and then he came back to me and said, "Oh, and by the way, the World of Nichiren Daishonin's Writings, Volume 2, has a really wonderful explanation of the Gohonzon that, I had really never heard it that way before." And so it had been, like, I got these back in 2006, about the same time that, this was published about the same time the Volume 2 of WND was published, okay? So as I go through here, sometimes it's going to say Gosho Zenshu as a reference point. It's because there was no Volume 2 to refer to, all right? But at any rate, let me try to think of what I'm saying. In addition to that, just today, I got something from my friend, my brother Bot in
I found it on Amazon.
BSG. Well, again, I never look at Amazon.
Right.
I look at SGI.
Yeah,
I should know better and just look at Amazon's got everything. You'd be surprised how many used books, like this, like lectures on the Sutra by Josei Toda is available on Amazon.
Wow.
But again, I caution everybody in saying that to express to you that there's a reason why I don't go back into the olden days. I'm not going to try and get anybody to listen to a 40-year-old interpretation like the Dick Costin videos. I have all kinds of respect for Mr. Costin, but some of those are 45 years old. They might as well be Nichiren Shoshu teachings, really, to be honest with you, because that's what they were at the time. Okay, so President Ikeda has made a definitive effort to get everything conveyed in a current and extemporaneous manner based on now. Okay, because now what we're split from the priesthood, right? That's been a long time now. That's been essentially 30 years if you think about it. Is when Nichiren 1990. It's been 30 years since. Okay, so while there's been casual references to the Buddhism of the Sun, I mean, right now President Ikeda is trying to qualify rather than me constantly saying Soka philosophy. He's trying to establish a mainstream of understanding of the teachings of Nichiren Daishonin as they're practiced by him, okay, and as they're practiced by many people, okay. And so I'm going to be reading from tonight, Volume 2 of the World of Nichiren Daishonin's Writings, and we'll be starting out on page 76. Prior to that, though, as I said, my brother Bot, let me read to you what he wrote from another wonderful BSG. There's so many wonderful BSG members. And I know what else I was going to say tonight. I also wanted to start tonight by praising all the women in the world, because if it weren't for all the women in the world, this planet would be screwed. Okay, so once again, the Shoten Zenjin of that gender really came through for me within the last couple of weeks. So, great respect, appreciation, and heartfelt gratitude to all of you that are female. And of course the boys too, but especially the women. At any rate, here we go. He says, "Hi Tom, I trust you're doing well and in good health, always praying for you." I'm so touched by how many people tell me that. And I pray for all of you too, by the way. He says, meanwhile, I hope it's okay for me to ask a question currently. And he's got another one pending. And Brother Bott, I'll answer your previous question tomorrow. But right now, he says, recently I've had instances where I've literally felt the protection of the Shoten Zenjin through tangible events happening. This has led me to armor and even greater faith than before. I would like to ask you specifically about the Buddhist gods. When we chant Daimoku and work for the law, are we tapping into the godly wisdom and power that resides within our own lives? Does Buddhism perceive the godly power as something innate within all life and not external? Thank you for all your videos. I cannot stress enough how amazingly they have helped me. So the real answer to some of to this question specifically is, it depends on whether or not you're a Buddha or a common mortal. How you understand that, because that's really something that graduates in time or until you pose that specific question for somebody to steer you to the specific answer. So I'm going to start out tonight because I got time. Hi, Amy. Okay. No problem. Okay, so I'm going to go to the dictionary definition of heavenly gods and benevolent deities, because we're going to go right back into the Tatsunokuchi evening tonight. Okay, and the whole blow by blow. And Hachiman's going to be in there, so this is part of my brother's question, is Hachiman is a protective deity too. By the way, only in Japan. So that kind of tells you a little bit of where the answer is going to go eventually here. But at any rate, from the Buddhist dictionary on page 277, when you want to know about Buddhist gods, it's under heavenly gods and benevolent deities, Shoten Zenjin. It says also Buddhist gods, protective gods, tutelary gods, guardian deities, etc. The gods that protect the correct Buddhist teaching and its practitioners, gods who function to protect the people and their land and bring good fortune to both. Heavenly gods and benevolent deities is a generic term for the Buddhist pantheon that includes Brahma, Shakra, the four heavenly kings, the sun goddess, the gods of the sun and the moon, and other deities. All those are on the Gohonzon, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so along with the god of the stars. Many of these gods and deities were traditionally revered in India, China, and Japan. They became part of Buddhist thought as Buddhism flourished in those areas. Rather than primary objects of belief or devotion, these are not gods that we pray to that are superior to us. Actually, these are influences that support and work for us. It's not the other way around as it would be as it relates to gods normally. Rather than primary objects of belief or devotion, Buddhism tends to view them as functioning to support and protect the Buddha and the law or Buddhist teachings and practitioners. The introduction, first chapter of the Lotus Sutra, describes a scene in which the heavenly beings or gods gather to hear the preaching of the sutra. The Peaceful Practices, 14th chapter of the sutra says, the heavenly beings day and night will, for the sake of the law, constantly guard and protect those who practice as the sutra teaches. So again, the qualifier there, bro, is that you got to see the protection of the Buddhist gods because you manifested it from your own behavior. Understand, this was not somebody saying, I'm going to cut him some slack today and do something strange in order to encourage him. No, you're the one that creates those encouragements. And they absolutely do build the level of faith that you have when you see yourself protected. But for a long time, Vol.2 Taishaku Niten Gaten Yojoten. That was Brahma Chakra, the god of the sun and the moon, stars. Okay, I used to constantly pray to them. Hachiman was one of the dudes. I call out to Hachiman because that's what the Daishonin had done on the way to Tatsunokuchi. So understand that these are all actually influences from our own life. They're karmic reflections of the causes we make and have made. It says, the Peaceful Practices says, the heavenly beings day and night will, for the sake of the law, constantly guard and protect those who practice as the sutra teaches. In the Lotus Sutra, the gods are regarded as the guardians of those who embrace the sutra. In Treatment of Illness, Nichiren writes, the fundamental nature of enlightenment manifests itself as Brahma Chakra, whereas the fundamental darkness manifests itself as the devil king of the sixth heaven. Here, gods are viewed as manifestations of the Buddha nature in one's life. So those gods are manifestations of your Buddha nature. Okay, they come from you. They are not outside of you. As the Gosha that we've been studying on attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime says, you must never think of any of the 80,000 sacred teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha's lifetime or any of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 existences are outside yourself. Buddhist gods are included in that. He says, the Golden Light Sutra reads, though this sutra exists in the nation, its ruler has never allowed it to be propagated. In his heart, he turns away from it, and he takes no pleasure in hearing its teachings. In the end, he makes it impossible for us, the 4 heavenly kings, and the other countless heavenly beings who are our followers, to hear this profound and wonderful teaching. He deprives us of the sweet dew of its words and cuts off from the flow of the correct teaching, so that our majesty and strength are drained away. And once we and the others abandon and desert this nation, then many different types of disasters will occur in the country, and the ruler will fall from power. This passage may be interpreted as indicating that the gods gain their strength from the Buddhist law, from you. You're the one that practices and manifests the Buddhist law. It's all just a theoretical old text unless you're living it, right? And they are the inherent functions of nature and society that protect those who uphold the law. But they are not generated from without. They are generated from within, from your action. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to start by saying all that, and then start right in for Mr. Sebi. I'm going to go to page 76 of volume 2 and start reading this. I'm not going to go into the beginning of this chapter. We're going to ultimately end up with a very well expressed explanation of the Gohonzon. And it's just like Mr. Matsuoka explained it to me so many years ago. So, starting on page 76, he says, by the way, this is 3 guys. This is Mr. Saito, who is the head of the study department, who is really the speaking author of last week's previous lecture. And so this is also then the assistant or the vice study department chief. So it's the study department chief, the vice chief, and Mr. Ikeda. Okay? So I'm just going to go Morinaka, Saito, Ikeda. Okay? Or I'll say President Ikeda. Because, okay. So page 76. Since he had been sentenced to exile on Sado, this meant that the Daishonin would be entrusted to the care of Hojo Nobutoki, the lord of Musashi, whose lands included Sado Island. It appears that the Daishonin was temporarily held at Nobutoki's residence in Kamakura. The Daishonin says, they outwardly said that I was to be sent into exile, but secretly it had been decided that I would be beheaded. While ostensibly sentencing him to exile, they had in fact decided to execute him. So this is the night after they came in to question him, okay? And they said, we're going to exile you. And in reality, Ryokan conspired to have him taken away and murdered in the middle of the night at Tatsunokuchi Beach, okay? So this is prior to that actually occurring. So he's saying, okay, all right, so around midnight, the Daishonin was placed on a horse and led to the execution grounds at Tatsunokuchi, surrounded by soldiers clad in armor. All of the proceedings took place under the cover of night. Saito, it would undoubtedly have occurred to any perceptive soldier that something was very much out of the ordinary. Certainly, if he were really a rebel, as they had all been told, this is a bad priest, this is a bad guy, Nichiren, right? He said if he were really a rebel, then it is conceivable that they would want to transport and quickly execute him before his allies could attack. Even so, I imagine that the contrast between the conduct of Heino Seimin and the Daishonin would have been enough to cause them to question the veracity of what they had been told about the case, because they don't know him from Adam, right? The soldiers that are taking them to execute him. President Ikeda. It may be that confusion began to sprout in their minds, the soldiers' minds, because of the great disparity between the rumored image of Nichiren as a villainous monk and the reality of the Daishonin who was now before them. The Daishonin was all too dignified and calm. Moreover, in the course of transporting the Daishonin to Tatsunokuchi, various human dramas unfolded. First, there was his remonstration with Bodhisattva Hachiman. The Daishonin's party approached Wakamiya Avenue, which runs through the center of Kamakura. It was a major road leading directly to Tsurugaoka Hachiman Shrine. Though surrounded on all sides by soldiers, the Daishonin got down from his horse, saying, "Don't make a fuss. I won't cause any trouble. I merely wish to say my last words to great Bodhisattva Hachiman." He then loudly admonished the deity. Remember, we talked about that. You know that. He issued a severe rebuke, saying in effect, "I, Nichiren, am the foremost votary of the Lotus Sutra in all Japan. How can Bodhisattva Hachiman fail to protect me when I am facing such great persecution? Have you forgotten your great debt to the Lotus Sutra? Will you fail to keep your promise to Shakyamuni?" Now, from this example, when I was a very young member, that's when I got into Bonten Taishaku Niten Gaten Myojoten, because I wasn't begging those guys. I was never asking them. I was telling them, because that was the example that Daishonin had left me. Basically, set them straight. They're supposed to protect me. The Lotus Sutra says they're supposed to protect me. So I'm not saying, please protect me. I'm saying, you better protect me. Okay? And it was faith that actually allowed me to manifest that. He says, Saito, the Tsurugaoka Hachiman Shrine was the main religious facility of the Kamakura regime, and Hachiman could be regarded as its protective deity. The entire town of Kamakura was designed with this Hachiman Shrine at its center. It was a religious city with Wakamiya Avenue as its central axis. The Daishonin now admonished this deity who was the city's primary symbol. President Ikeda, among the officials present, there were doubtless some who regarded the Daishonin's actions with shock and abhorrence, but he invoked Shakyamuni Buddha's name and logically discussed the assembly of the Lotus Sutra. The soldiers were no doubt moved as they listened to the Daishonin's resonant voice, remonstrating with Hachiman. He says, "We can imagine that when the Daishonin again mounted his horse and they proceeded on their way, the procession continued in somber silence, the soldiers deeply absorbed in thought." Pardon me. Morinaka. Eventually, the party arrived at Yui Beach, where they approached the Goryo Shrine. The Daishonin said, "Stop a minute, gentlemen. I have a message for someone living near here." He sent a boy called Kumeo to summon Shijo Kingo, who lived nearby in Hase. Hase. I guess that's an area. Okay. In his alarm, Kingo rushed to the scene barefoot. He grasped the reins of the Daishonin's horse and wept in grief. President Ikeda. To Kingo and his brothers, who had now also joined him, the Daishonin patiently explained the significance of this great persecution, saying, "Tonight I will be beheaded. This is something I have wished for many years." Okay? I went right into that too when I was a young member. It's like, don't be afraid to die for the sake of the law. It's the fastest way to attain Buddhahood. Okay? So he says, Kingo, for his part, resolved to commit suicide at the Daishonin's side if his teacher should be killed. It was a sublime drama of mentor and disciple, and that's certainly exactly the relationship they had. This mentor-disciple did not start with Daisaku Ikeda. Okay, it started with Nichiren Daishonin. Persevering along the supreme path of life no matter what may happen, ready to give their lives together for their convictions, this image of mentor and disciple must have left a powerful impression on everyone present, regardless of their religious beliefs. By that point, the minds of the soldiers must have been completely shaken. Just what kind of criminal is this? They were probably wondering. Can it really be right to execute him like this in the middle of the night? Are we about to commit some wrong that can never be redeemed? It would not at all be surprising if this was how they felt. It is often said that life is a drama. This scene of mentor and disciple, like a great artwork on display before them, could not have failed to make quite an impression, even on these battle-tested soldiers of eastern Japan. Morinaka. The party passed close by the Goraku-ji temple and then continued to the execution grounds. For a description of the scene when they arrived, I would like to read from the actions of the Votary of the Lotus Sutra, which is a gosho that you can read. We haven't read it yet. I will read it someday for the other channel. This is part of it. He says, "Finally we came to a place that I knew must be the site of my execution. Indeed, the soldiers stopped and began to mill around in excitement. Seimanojo, Shijo Kingo, in tears said, 'These are your last moments.' I replied, 'You don't understand. What greater joy could there be? Don't you remember what you have promised?' I had no sooner said this when a brilliant orb as bright as the moon burst forth from the direction of Inoshima, which would have been to his right as he was on the beach facing the water. It was shortly before dawn and still too dark to see anyone's face, but the radiant object clearly illuminated everyone like bright moonlight. The executioner fell on his face, his eyes blinded. The soldiers were filled with panic. Some ran off into the distance. Some jumped down from their horses and huddled on the ground, while others crouched in their saddles. I called out, 'Here, why do you shrink from this vile prisoner? Come closer, come closer.' But no one would approach me." The Daishonin continues, "What if dawn should come? You must hurry up and execute me. Once the day breaks, it will be too ugly a job." I urged them on, but they made no response. Saito. When the executioner, with sword drawn, was readying himself to carry out the execution, Kingo began sobbing uncontrollably. By contrast, to the very end, the Daishonin maintained complete serenity and composure because of his faith. It doesn't say because of his faith. It's because he was the Daishonin, but this is the faith we're supposed to have. President Ikeda, his words were, "What greater joy could there be?" Perfectly summed up his attitude. How can one develop such an immense state of life? How can a human being achieve such greatness? There is no greater mystery than this. I am confident that this is the power of making a vow. I talk about that all the time. When we dedicate our lives to fulfilling deep pledge and correct ideals, our hearts develop limitlessly. I screwed that up. How can one develop such an immense state of life? How can a human being achieve such greatness? There is no greater mystery than this. I am confident that this is the power of making a vow. When we dedicate our lives to fulfilling deep pledge and to correct ideals, our hearts develop limitlessly. Buddhism speaks of a pledge from the remote past. Such a pledge is the foundation that enables us to drive away darkness and live in accord with the essential nature of phenomena. Specifically, this means a heart that yearns for the happiness of oneself and others and for the accomplishment of the great vow of Kosen Rufu. This means being a bodhisattva of the earth in reality. Absolutely nothing can obstruct the spirit of a person who is awakened to his original vow. And that's what I'm encouraging everybody to get to if you haven't yet. Though one's body may be cut down, absolutely no one can destroy one's spirit. You can't kill me. Such is the power of a person who lives a life of compassion. Even if facing hellish circumstances alone, such a person fears nothing. Rather, those around someone so completely free of fear may feel a sense of trepidation. It could be said that Nichiren Daishonin's lifetime of facing one great persecution after another proves that the power of a thoroughly developed human spirit is eternal. Our original state, that's called eternal. With his entire being, the Daishonin declared, "Behold the greatness that a human being can attain." Morinaka. As to the nature of the brilliant orb that appeared at that time, there are various theories. President Ikeda, you have written of research suggesting that it was a fragment from the Tarid Aritide meteor stream. President Ikeda. I'd never heard of that part before either, but always wondered where did it come from. My whole point is that it was already coming for a long time before that moment when it appeared. Okay? So this is the link of the inseparability of us and the entire realm of phenomena that is referred to in the Gosho we're studying. Okay? This brilliant orb is President Ikeda, this brilliant orb is a matter of endless fascination. But the important point is that it appeared at precisely the moment when the Daishonin was about to be beheaded. The moments of which is what made it so dramatic to everybody that was there, because if they didn't think God had come right out of the earth, you know, I'm sure that they were freaking out. But the important point is that it appeared at precisely the moment when the Daishonin was about to be beheaded. Brother Bott, that's what you did. You did that. The moments of nature itself can probably be explained in terms of physics, and as research advances, the true nature of this object will no doubt be further clarified. But the fact that it appeared at that exact moment is what is key. It can be seen as proof that, in having conquered the ultimate fear, the fear of death, the Daishonin defeated darkness and manifested the nature of the law. That is to say, as a human being, he fully established in himself the mind of the Buddha. Okay? That was that significance. He's going to go into the whole thing about dying, whatever, right? The Daishonin attributes the appearance of this brilliant orb to the workings of the Buddhist gods, which I've already just explained to you from the dictionary. He says that the god of the moon, one of the three heavenly gods of light, manifested as the brilliant orb. Morinaka. In any case, it was most unusual for soldiers such as those accompanying the Daishonin to tremble in fear, throw themselves prostrate on the ground, run away, and cower down. This must have been because the Daishonin's magnificent state of life had aroused in them a sense of religious awe. After that, it was decided that the Daishonin would be sent in exile on Sado. But within the government, there was a recognition on the part of the regent, Tokimune in particular, that this person is not really guilty. Because of such circumstances, there were even intimations that the Daishonin might simply be released. But as a result of the persistent machinations of the craven group who were assembled against him, Ryokan and all those dudes, public opinion turned against the Daishonin, and it was decided that he would be exiled to Sado. At the same time, the Daishonin's followers also became the target of a major repression. Okay, so now this is where we go into this casting off the transient and revealing the true, and this is what's true for us as well as it was for him. We don't do a Tatsunakuchi necessarily, but we absolutely hit a moment where we realize that it's not boilerplate, it's not happy talk. We are the thus come one. And like I said, if that's real, you can never be anything but that from that point on. You don't go, there's nobody that gets to that point and goes Titan. Okay? He says, so Saito, casting off the transient and revealing the truth. Saito, while saving a detailed discussion for another occasion, I would like to confirm that the Tatsunakuchi persecution had the greatest significance of any persecution that the Daishonin faced in his lifetime. That's because it was then that he actualized the principle of casting off the transient and revealing the true. In the opening of the eyes, which he composed on Sado Island in February of the following year, 1272, the Daishonin himself says, on the 12th day of the 9th month of last year, between the hours of the rat and the ox, this person named Nichiren was beheaded. It is his soul that has come to this island of Sado, and in the 2nd month of the following year, snowbound, is writing this to send to his close disciples. President Ikeda, in saying that he was beheaded, when in fact he was not, the Daishonin indicates that the self he had been until he came to an end at the execution grounds of, In saying that he was beheaded when in fact he was not, the Daishonin indicates that the self he had been until then came to an end at the execution grounds of Tatsunakuchi. He was no longer a common mortal. He could never. This is called Hoshaku Kinpon. Okay, To put it simply, it implies that he had been reborn as a new self. It implies that he had been reborn as a new self. He had actually taken on, he had revealed his true identity, his original identity. It is, because what are we? We're bodhisattvas of the earth. Our original identity is the original disciples of the original teacher. He's going to get into all that. To put it simply, he implies that he has been reborn as a new self. In the phrase, it is his soul that has come to this island of Sado. Soul means this new self. The true identity that the Daishonin manifested during the persecution at Tatsunokuchi. This passage is regarded as the Daishonin's affirmation of his having actualized the principle of casting off the transient and revealing the true. Morinaka, casting off the transient and revealing the true refers to the Buddha casting aside his transient status and revealing his true or original identity. The Chinese character for transient used here means reflection or relic. Originally, this was a term that the great teacher Tentai of China, this isn't from the Lotus Sutra, this is from Tentai, which again, everything we do, Tentai, if it's not for Tentai, it all falls apart. Okay? So originally, this was a term that the great teacher Tentai of China used to contrast the Buddha of the theoretical teaching, the provisional Buddha described in the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni who attained enlightenment for the first time during his present lifetime in India, with the Buddha of the essential teaching, or true Buddha, the Buddha who in fact attained enlightenment in the remote past, the one that talked about I attained Buddhahood in the 16th chapter, numberless major world system dust particle kalpas ago. Tentai explained that Shakyamuni who attained enlightenment for the first time during his present lifetime in India, the guy under the Bodhi tree, is a reflection that the Buddha who attained enlightenment in the remote past is Shakyamuni's true identity. He expressed this in terms of the principle of casting off the transient and revealing the true. Tentai did. All right. This is explained with the analogy. This is explained with the analogy of the moon and its reflection. The actual moon in the sky is the true identity, and the image of the moon reflected on the surface of the water is the transient status. Okay? President Ikeda, this idea of casting off the transient and revealing the true from Tentai's Buddhism has been incorporated into the doctrine of Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism by Nichiren. Nichikan Shonin explains the above passage from the opening eyes of the eyes as follows. And again, we still revere the interpretation and teaching of Nichikan Shonin, Nichiren Shoshu, 26th High Priest. This is from Nichikan. The fundamental significance of this passage is that our school's founder, Nichiren Daishonin, indeed became the Buddha of limitless joy, Jijuyushin Nyorai, who has been enlightened since time without beginning as an ordinary being in the stage of hearing the name and the words of the truth. Now, I injected that Jijuyushin Nyorai, but that's the Japanese, that's how I learned it. Okay? You are a Jijuyushin Nyorai. All right? We all are, once we realize the truth about our true identity. And once we reflect through our behavior that true identity. Do you understand? It's all based on our behavior, not talk. Okay? Okay. The fundamental significance of this passage is that our school's founder, Nichiren Daishonin, indeed became the Buddha of limitless joy, who has been enlightened since time without beginning as an ordinary being in the stage of hearing the name and the words of the truth. Declaring his attaining enlightenment while manifesting in his person this inner truth, he emerged as the true Buddha of sowing in the latter day of the law. Up until then, he had been reflecting things he hadn't. That's when the Buddhism of sowing was declared to be the Buddhism of sowing. It wasn't until after Tatsunokuchi. In other words, at the time of the Tatsunokuchi persecution, Nichiren Daishonin discarded his transient status as an ordinary practitioner at the stage of hearing the name and the words of the truth, which is what? It's only the second stage. That's just hearing that, that's not going through the next 4 stages even. Just that fact now opened the way for all ordinary people to be Buddhas in their present form. Do you understand? Okay, so in other words, at the time of the Tatsunokuchi persecution, Nichiren Daishonin discarded his transient status as an ordinary practitioner at the stage of hearing the name and the words of the truth. And while an ordinary person, because this is the significant thing, he was an ordinary person. He wasn't a god dude or someone different than any of us. He was just like us. While an ordinary person, he manifested his true identity as the Buddha of limitless joy, Jiju Yushin Nyorai, all right, who had been enlightened since time without beginning, because we all go back to Kuan. That's what time without beginning is, right? That's the original state, all right? To put it another way, while remaining an ordinary person, he manifested the eternal thus come one that is one with the eternal mystic law, which is what we do. The fundamental law of the universe. That's exactly what we do and achieve exactly the same state. After discarding his transient status and revealing his true identity, the Daishonin stood up as the Buddha of the latter day of the law. And as the Buddha of the latter day, he began inscribing the Gohonzon in the form of a mandala for all people to revere as the fundamental object of devotion and to believe in as the origin and basis of their own lives. The Gohonzon was the origin and basis of their own lives. That piece of paper that he had created. Now, is it the piece of paper? No. I've been talking about the real Gohonzons inside you. It's not a scroll. It's not a bunch of words, what I'm talking about inside you. I'm talking about the original state and the wisdom of the original teacher, which is inside you. Incidentally, we should note that in casting off the transient, the Chinese character for casting off also means opening up the truth. Saito. This is a point that is easily misunderstood. So let's pay attention. Casting off the transient does not mean that the Daishonin became someone else. Okay, so he didn't become someone else. Certainly the transient status and the true identity are as different as heaven and earth. If we only pay attention to this point, then the tendency is to suppose that he turned into an entirely different being. President Ikeda, the Daishonin manifested the life of the Buddha of limitless joy as an ordinary person through and through. If we overlook this point, then the incorrect notion may arise that attaining Buddhahood means becoming a superior being distinct from a human being, someone other than who you are right now. Nichiren Daishonin did not give up his life as an ordinary person. Rather, he brilliantly manifested the life of the eternal Buddha within the life of an ordinary person. Who's the eternal Buddha? The original teacher. That's what we talk about all the time. The life of Nichiren Daishonin also resides within your life. There's no separation between your life and the life of Nichiren Daishonin. There's no separation between your life and the Gohonzon. There's no separation between Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and your life. Okay? There is, continuing on page 85, there is another important point that I would like to note. Namely, this principle also applies to us. When we dedicate our lives to Kosen Rufu, overcoming painful suffering and persevering in faith, we too can actualize the principle of casting off the transient and revealing the true. As ordinary people, we can manifest the same life of the Buddha that the Daishonin possessed. Nichikan Shonin said, when one embraces and has faith in this Gohonzon and chants Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, one's life immediately becomes the fundamental object of the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. It becomes the life of Nichiren Daishonin. That's what's going on, folks, when we're in front of the Gohonzon doing that. He also said, when we gain awareness of the object of devotion in terms of the person, our life manifests the life of the founder, Nichiren Daishonin, innate to our own lives. Because there's no separation. Okay? When we gain awareness of the object of devotion, and that doesn't make him God. Do understand that. right? He's an ordinary human being that was the first one to show the way to actual Ichinen Sanzen. That's all this is the attainment or the revealing of actual Ichinen Sanzen. When we gain awareness of the object devotion in terms of the law, our life manifests the object devotion of the high sanctuary of true Buddhism. When we truly are most fortunate to have encountered this teaching. If the goal were to become an ideal, superior, or different kind of being, then becoming happy in this life would be unattainable, because you can't change being a human being. Okay, that's part of the deal. All right, that's why 9 worlds. Let's just make them better. Morinaka, the idea of becoming a Buddha is fine, but if it meant leaving this actual world or becoming a different person, then it would not hold much attraction for people of the latter day of the law. President Ikeda, Nichiren Daishonin is the Buddha of the latter day precisely because he revealed the goal for all people of becoming a Buddha and the means for doing so. Morinaka, it is because Nichiren Daishonin actualized the principle of casting off the transient and revealing the true and inscribed his life as the Gohonzon that we are able to make the Gohonzon our actual object of devotion. With the Gohonzon as a clear mirror, we too can cast off the transient and reveal the true. In this light, the Daishonin having cast off the transient and revealed the true at Tatsunokuchi is an extremely important event. President Ikeda, with his life, the Daishonin showed us an example of attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime. Casting off the transient and revealing the true means establishing such a firm self that we can overcome any painful hardship, banish darkness, and manifest the essential nature of phenomena. The more great difficulties we face, the more the life of the world of Buddhahood shines forth. Establishing such a self is the way to attain Buddhahood in this lifetime. It is by manifesting the faith to overcome hardships that we can polish our humanity in a true sense. Morinaka, I think the tendency to try to avoid difficulties is much more pronounced in people than the inclination to try to overcome hardship. That's such a deep and correct sentence. Let me say it again. I think this is from Mr. Morinaka. I think the tendency to try to avoid difficulties is much more pronounced in people than the inclination to try to overcome hardship. Even when we have our backs up against the wall, we tend to think that there must be some way out of it. Only after we arrive at a complete deadlock following repeated attempts to avoid dealing with the situation do we finally decide to make a stand. And then President Ikeda said, this might be the basic difference between men's division members and women's division members. He nailed us. He nailed us. From one standpoint, the important thing, and you understand what he's saying. Men will try anything else other than chanting Daimoku. Women will get down, they'll go ahead and practice correctly. Frankly speaking, I've watched it for almost 50 years. It's the truth. That's why I yield to all of you. From one standpoint, the important thing is that we eventually sit down in front of the Gohonzon and chant Daimoku, no matter how long it takes. On the other hand, if we're going to sit in front of the Gohonzon eventually anyway, then it is much faster to start out by doing just that. We have to directly connect with the Gohonzon. We have to directly connect with the Gohonzon. That means to perceive the truth of the Gohonzon. This is the path whereby an ordinary person can easily become a Buddha. This is faith. The Daishonin says, what is called faith is nothing unusual. Faith means putting one's trust in the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni, many treasures, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, and the heavenly gods and benevolent deities, and chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. As a woman cherishes her husband, as a man lays down his life for his wife, as parents refuse to abandon their children, or as a child refuses to leave its mother. This is what is meant by honestly discarding expedient means and not accepting a single verse of the other sutras. People's minds inevitably tend towards confusion. Yeah. People's minds inevitably tend towards confusion. Everything depends on our cleanly disassociating ourselves from this mind of confusion. Honestly here means in a straightforward fashion. For an image, think of how when chopping bamboo lengthwise, the two halves split cleanly. We don't face difficulties only after having deepened our faith. Rather, it is by facing difficulties that we can polish our lives and develop invincible diamond-like faith. No matter what worries or sufferings we may have, it is important that we pray honestly about them to the Gohonzon. Through chanting Daimoku, we can overcome any suffering. This might seem like just a subtle difference in the order of things, but whether we can really do this is decisive. Since it's so decisive, I'm going to read it again because it's the last part of President Keita. Here we go. From President Keita. We don't face difficulties only after having deepened our faith. Rather, it is by facing difficulties that we can polish our lives and develop invincible diamond-like faith. That means by getting benefits, by chanting without this wisdom and understanding, is quite okay. Nobody starts out that way. Okay? We're talking about 6th stage here. A practice, not even 5th. Okay? No matter what worries or sufferings we may have, it is important that we pray honestly about them to the Gohonzon. That means we don't fake faith. If we don't feel faithy, you can say that right to the Gohonzon. I'm not feeling it, dude. Help me out. Okay? I've done it many times. You have to seek the life condition, not fake the life condition. You have to actualize it. All right? That creates a power in your prayer that doesn't exist when you pray without that power in your prayer. Through chanting Daimoku, we can overcome any suffering. This might seem like just a subtle difference in the order of things, but whether we can really do this is decisive. When we live out our lives of mission, which means we're living as bodhisattvas of the earth, not just practitioners, okay? We are certain to encounter a variety of painful difficulties, but as long as our hearts remain firm, as long as we are not swayed in our faith, there is no hardship we cannot overcome. There is no ordeal that we cannot break through. People inherently possess immeasurable power. This is the power of the Buddha of limitless joy who has been enlightened since time without beginning. Therefore, the more we struggle and the more we can draw forth, Therefore, the more we struggle, the more power we can draw forth. Faith is the means for drawing forth this hidden treasure. Great hardships lead to attaining enlightenment. Great persecution ensures that we will quickly become Buddhas. The Daishonin taught this way of life to his followers by overcoming each great persecution that he faced. And we can take it that during the Tatsunokuchi persecution, he provided Shijo Kingo with various lessons on this supreme way of life. He did so for his disciples and for the future. Shijo Kingo did not have a mind of confusion. As a result, mentor and disciple together were able to attain the effect or fruit of Buddhahood. And Tatsunokuchi itself became the land of tranquil light. The transient to be cast off is weakness. It is cowardice. The Daishonin, by manifesting his true identity of courage, was able to demonstrate for all people the principle of casting off the transient and revealing the true. It is by standing up to all hardships with determination, by making the Daishonin's courageous spirit our own, that we can actualize this principle. Saito, looking at the world today, it seems as though the darkness of ignorance shrouds the hearts of all mankind. The 20th century was a century that spewed forth darkness in all areas. The darkness of war, the darkness of environmental destruction wrought by egoism, the darkness that produces poverty, the darkness of discrimination, and the darkness of cultural conflicts. President Ikeda, but there has been one good fruit to be harvested from all this. That is, conscientious people have begun to recognize that unless human beings themselves change, nothing can be done to dispel this darkness that blankets human society. Norman Cousins, the noted American journalist and peace activist, was a dear friend of mine. While he had encountered many hardships, including serious illness, to the end of his life, he continued to believe in the power of the human being and to maintain his optimism. He said, some people say that human beings cannot possibly develop the comprehension necessary to deal with change in the modern world. But there is a larger view of man, one that history is prepared to endorse. This view holds that the great responses already exist inside man and that they need only be invoked to become manifest. For humans, our infinitely malleable, infinitely perfectible, infinitely capacious, for humans are infinitely malleable, infinitely perfectible, infinitely capacious. It is the privilege of anyone in a position of leadership to appeal to those towering possibilities. Back to President Ikeda's comment. Transforming the darkness that besets humankind literally means transforming the destiny of humankind. The 21st century may be said to represent the crossroads at which all humankind must cast off the transient and reveal the true. If the world's destiny cannot be changed, then this century will turn out to be even darker than the last, where there were 2 world wars, by the way. In that scenario, humankind will have no future. And it's the truth. When we were talking about, I said, Earth, I said the sun's going to supernova, and I said come to an end. You're doing a good job already, right? That's what he's saying, okay? The present age of hardships and ordeals, which we all know is actually upon us. We're living in it, which is kind of cool if you think about it based on what this teaching's talking about. We're right in the middle of this just as much as if we were in Kamakura, is what I'm saying. The present age of hardships and ordeals represents a golden opportunity for all people to awaken a new global awareness. Nichiren Buddhism teaches the necessity and the possibility of discarding of the transient and revealing the true for all humankind. Therefore, I believe that Daishonin's teaching is a necessary and indispensable religion for humankind in the 21st century. I also firmly believe that it is the mission of the use of the 21st century to demonstrate this. And that's the end of that. And it's 8:59. Can you guys give me 15 more minutes? Yeah? Okay, because I want to go right. I want to at least start this next chapter, because this is going to go on. I'm going to read the whole rest of this book. The Gohonzon, because this is the perfect segue, because we're going to be talking about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo when we go back to the Gosho. The Gohonzon, revealing the eternal law for all people. Pardon me, page 96. Pardon me, page 96, chapter 3, I think it is. It's chapter 3 of volume 2. Sokogak from, this is from Mr. Saito again. It's full, it's going to give him, since this is a new chapter, it's giving his full title. Sokogakai Study Department Chief Katsuji Saito. The Youth Division Intermediate Level Study Examination and the Intermediate Level Study Examination for the Men's and Women's Divisions were held this year on September 1st and September 29th, 2002, respectively. Approximately 250,000 people throughout Japan sat for the test. Now, realize that there are like 15,000 practicing members in the UK. There's about 20,000 practicing members, actual genuinely practicing members in the United States. I don't know how many people there are here. But 250,000 people took the study tests back in 2002 in Japan alone. Enabling so many people to earnestly study Buddhism is a proud tradition of the Soka Gakkai. I am also confident that our study program has enormous social significance as a major popular philosophical movement. At the time of the Men's and Women's Division exam, USGI President Ikeda visited one of the exam sites in Hachioji, Tokyo, to encourage the examinees. On behalf of all participants, I thank you very much, President Ikeda, SGI President Ikeda. I commend all those who took the study exam on their hard work, as well as those who administered the test and everyone involved. I sincerely applaud your strenuous efforts in Buddhist study. Soka Gakkai Study Department Vice Chief Murasaka Morinaka. Those taking the exam often feel nervous. I understand that receiving encouragement from you, President Ikeda, set the participants at ease so they could really show what they had learned. In addition to those at that particular site, those sitting for the exam and those helping administer it throughout the country were very encouraged by your words. At that time, you shared with us important guidelines for Buddhist study. For example, you said, we take action to accomplish Kosen Rufu. Study gives us the power to do so. Here alone lies the path to attaining Buddhahood. So what we are doing is absolutely in concert with the direction and encouragement of Daisaku Ikeda as it relates to what is required to actually attain Buddhahood in your present form. We take action to accomplish Kosen Rufu. Study gives us the power to do so. Here alone lies the path to attaining Buddhahood. You also remarked, the Buddhist law is the eternal principle that The Buddhist law is the eternal principle that pervades all life in the universe. Buddhism teaches the fundamentals for achieving happiness. President Ikeda, that was from Mr. Morinaka, talking about what President Ikeda had said. Now President Ikeda is going to add. We who uphold the Buddhism of Nichiren Daishonin base our lives on the great and fundamental law of the universe, that is, the mystic law. In addition, through studying the Gosho, we can confirm how significant this is. Nothing is more rewarding than directly connecting with the mystic law by following the path of faith, practice, and study. It is the only way to establish the eternal happiness described as boundless joy of the law. And he's talking again, connecting with the mystic law, which is chanting Daimoku to the Gohonzon. He says, open your eyes to the eternal law. Now you're going to begin to hear a little bit of this is going to sound familiar because some of this was used in creating the Teachings for Victory texts. Okay? President Ikeda, a genuine Buddha takes action to enable all people to directly connect with the path of happiness along which he himself has advanced. Shakyamuni perceived that his life itself embodied the mystic law. He understood that all living beings were likewise embodiments of the same mystic law and were therefore capable of attaining the same boundless joy of the law. Unfortunately, however, people's eyes are not open to that truth. Shrouded in various illusions, they repeatedly engage in foolish actions and end up suffering. I did my share of that. Shakyamuni regarded his fellow human beings, all of whom share with him the same potential for enlightenment, with compassion, saddened by their worries. He took on their sufferings as his own. Therefore, he tirelessly expounded his teachings, the Dharma or law, to awaken all people to the truth concealed in their lives. The Buddha wholeheartedly devoted himself to the struggle to open people's eyes to the eternal law, to which he was awakened. Shakyamuni's true identity, Shakyamuni's true identity is clarified in the lifespan of the Thus Come One, 16th chapter of the Lotus Sutra. In a word, it is that of the eternal Buddha who is one with the eternal law. President Ikeda, Shakyamuni actualized with his life itself the state of the oneness with the eternal law. He realized that he himself embodied the eternal mystic law, that he was the Buddha who eternally struggles for the happiness of living beings. This is the Buddha who attained enlightenment in the remote past, expounded in the lifespan chapter, numberless major world system dust particle kalpas ago. That's not talking about Kuai. Morinaka. The Buddha who attained enlightenment in the remote past is the Buddha who, since attaining enlightenment at a time in the inconceivably distant past, has continued taking action in the real world to lead all beings to enlightenment. By contrast, the typical view of the Buddha presented in most sutras is that of a Buddha who carried out immeasurable practices over countless past lives, who attained enlightenment for the first time in his present lifetime and entered nirvana upon death, was blown out. That was the object. This is fundamentally different from the view of the Buddha as having attained enlightenment in the remote past found in the Lotus Sutra. Everybody's with me, right? Nobody's got any questions, right? Okay. President Ikeda. The Buddha who is awakened to the eternal law eternally acts to lead people to enlightenment. This is a revolutionary view of the Buddha and a different way of thinking with regard to life's eternal nature. Saito. This difference lies in whether we identify eternally with peace and This difference lies whether we identify eternally with the peace and tranquility of nirvana or with ongoing actions of compassion. Do you understand what he's saying there? Okay. If we identify with the peace and tranquility, all we're looking for is our own peace and tranquility. That's to be blown out. That was the objective of Hinayana. Okay? Or with ongoing actions of compassion. That's the Bodhisattva ideal. That's Mahayana, right? That's what Saito's saying. If you're just looking at Buddhism in its entirety, it depends on how you view. Are you a Hinayanist or are you a Mahayanist? President Ikeda, that's right. The Daishonin began inscribing the Gohonzon after casting off the transient and revealing the true at Tatsunokuchi. This was because he wanted to guide the people of the latter day of the law towards the great path of eternal happiness. He did so by revealing, as an ordinary person, his true identity as the Buddha of limitless joy, enlightened from time without beginning. Now we're talking about Kuan Ganjo. He did so by revealing as an ordinary person his true identity as the Buddha of limitless joy, enlightened from time without beginning, who is one with and indivisible from the eternal law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay? Saito, Nichiren Daishonin, acting with immense compassion, manifested the eternal law to which he was enlightened as the teaching for the happiness of all people over the 10,000 years and more of the latter day. President Ikeda, Nichiren Daishonin named this eternal law Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. While Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the name of the law, it is also the name of the life of the Buddha who is one with that law. That is to say, it is the very life of Nichiren Daishonin. Okay? That's why we are not calling him God when we say the life of Nichiren Daishonin exists within you. We're talking about the inseparability of Buddha nature, period. All right? This law is the ultimate that the original teacher has expressed to us that we're supposed to now go out and propagate. All right? This law is the ultimate source of all Buddhas. Therefore, rather than making Shakyamuni or any other Buddha the object of devotion, the object of devotion should be the eternal law itself. In questions and answers on the object of devotion, the Daishonin says, as for the object of devotion, you should employ that which is most superior, which is why we use the Gohonzon and not a Shakyamuni statue or a Nichiren statue. Do you understand? All right. He further indicates that this object of devotion is not the Lord of teaching, Shakyamuni, but the Lotus Sutra itself. Because if you read the Lotus Sutra, you'll find that there were people preaching the Lotus Sutra way before the 16th son of great universal wisdom excellence came into it, okay? Which Shakyamuni, many treasures, and all the Buddhas of three existences, the 10 directions, have taken as their object of devotion. Let me say that again. In questions and answers on the object of devotion, the Daishonin says, as for the object of devotion, you should employ that which is most superior, which is why we chant the Gohonzon. He further indicates that this object of devotion is not the Lord of teachings, Shakyamuni, but the Lotus Sutra itself, which Shakyamuni, many treasures, and all the Buddhas of the three existences in 10 directions have taken as their object of devotion. Again, it's not originated by Shakyamuni, or many treasures wouldn't have come there to say everything he's saying is true. He couldn't have. He'd be hearing it for the first time from Shakyamuni preaching it. Right? Morinaka, in the same writing, he also says the Lotus Sutra is the father and mother. The Lotus Sutra is the father and mother of Shakyamuni and the eyes of all Buddhas. Because Shakyamuni, Mahavajracana, and all Buddhas of the 10 directions are born from the Lotus Sutra, I now make this law, that is the source of all phenomena, the object of devotion. Here he indicates that the Lotus Sutra is the ultimate law that gives rise to all Buddhas. While he speaks of the Lotus Sutra, the Daishonin is specifically referring to Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. President Ikeda, in another Gosho, the Daishonin states, and this is why I wanted to get to this part. Thank you for giving me this time. In another Gosho, the Daishonin states that Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the master of all the Buddhas of the three existences, the teacher of all the bodhisattvas in the 10 directions, and the guide that enables all living beings to attain the Buddha way. The eternal Buddha, who is one with the eternal law, is the teacher of all Buddhas throughout time and space. Shakyamuni awakened to this law and lived out his life with this law as his teacher. This law is referred to as the Dharma and as the thus come one. Also, I think that the words of testimony he uttered immediately upon entering Nirvana, encouraging his disciples to rely on themselves and on the ultimate truth of Buddhism. Shakyamuni's intent was to urge the people in the world after his death to form a connection with the eternal law, which is what we are doing when we chant Daimoku to the Gohonzon. Morinaka, the revelation in the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra of Shakyamuni's true identity as the Buddha who attained enlightenment in the remote past indicates that one should rely on the law and make the law the object of devotion. President Ikeda, the Lotus Sutra calls out to people to earnestly seek the law that was Shakyamuni's own teacher and teaches the path to directly connecting with this law. Saito, doesn't this in itself amount to a great religious revolution? Even today, many people are under the mistaken impression that the Buddha is a being who dwells in enlightenment in some distant place and who occasionally descends among living beings to bestow a teaching upon them. If you're a Theravada Buddhist, you do believe that. In Morinaka, in short, the popular conception of the Buddha is that of an exceedingly superior being, or many of the other schools that you're not aware of what their teaching actually is. Morinaka, right? Yeah. In short, the popular conception of the Buddha is that an exceedingly superior, In short, the popular conception of the Buddha is that of an exceedingly superior being. In truth, however, the Buddha is great because the law that gives rise to his Buddhahood is great, not because of him. Naturally, all of us ordinary people are prone to various illusions. The existence of a Buddha makes it possible to approach an understanding of the world of truth. This itself is one of the Buddhist's greatest virtues. President Ikeda, in short, the Buddha is someone who guides people to the eternal law that is one with the eternal Buddha, to which he himself became enlightened and made his teacher. Nichiren Daishonin. The Buddha is a person who continuously struggles to open people's eyes so that they can directly connect themselves with that law. This effort is grounded in the deep insight that the eternal law exists within the lives of all people. In that sense, the eternal law is the foundation upon which all people in the world can form a connection. The Australian psychologist Viktor E. Frankl, who had been imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps during World War II, said, thousands of years ago, mankind developed monotheism. You know what that is, right? The belief in one God. Okay, monotheism is the belief in one God. Today, another step is due. I would call it monothropism, not the belief in the one God, but rather an awareness of the one mankind, the awareness of the unity of humanity. Otherwise, he says, it will be impossible to find meaning in the life that pertains to all people. Such aspiration, I believe, draws us a step closer to the Lotus Sutra, as is clear from Shakyamuni's pledge to make all persons equal to me without any distinction between us. The purpose of Buddhism is to help all people achieve the same state of life as the Buddha. We must not think of Shakyamuni, who attained enlightenment in the remote past, as described in the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra, as a special being comparable to the absolute deity of a monotheistic religion, God, Allah, whatever. On the contrary, the sutra reveals the supremely respect-worthy state of life towards which all people should strive. From this universal perspective, the Buddha who attained enlightenment in the remote past does not refer to only the one person Shakyamuni. Rather, it expresses a universal law, the Lotus Sutra, a universal law. The Lotus Sutra indicates the eternal law, and therein lies its true value. The title of the Lotus Sutra, Myoho Renge-kyo, expresses the indivisible relationship of the life of the Buddha and the ultimate law. Saito, the Lotus Sutra does not contain a precise explanation of the title, but I think we can take the following as one of its meanings. Myoho Renge-kyo expresses and which is the title of the Lotus Sutra, right? Mm-hmm. Myoho Renge-kyo expresses the life of the Buddha in which the inexhaustible power of the mystic law is in full bloom, where Buddhist gods are taking care of you. Mm. Like a pure white lotus flower blossoming just as it is, without any impurity. It is the ultimate, most fundamental expression of the life of the Buddha. President Ikeda, if we seek for the object of devotion in the Lotus Sutra, if we seek for the object of devotion in the Lotus Sutra, it is more appropriate that we take Myoho Renge-kyo as this object of devotion, rather than Shakyamuni, who attained enlightenment in the remote past. Nichiren Daishonin was the first to clearly indicate this. Without the Daishonin's teaching, people would have lost sight of the significance of the Lotus Sutra as the teaching that reveals the object of devotion. Morinaka, Myoho Renge-kyo expresses the eternal Buddha who is one with the eternal law, which is Shakyamuni's true identity. The real value of the Lotus Sutra, which expounds the enlightenment of all people, is found in its revelation of this ultimate entity. With the passage of time, however, those who understood the true value of the Lotus Sutra grew increasingly few. Just reading its text, it is hard to see the Lotus Sutra as anything other than a fairy tale or legend from the distant past. Even if people come away from reading it with the idea that Shakyamuni was a splendid Buddha, it would not occur to them that they too are Buddhists. For that reason, there needed to be a way for people to connect more directly with the law. And then I'll continue to read on page 103 next week. It's from casting off the transient and revealing the truth to inscribing the Gohonzai. Mm-hmm. And then we'll go on from there. Okay? So see you next week. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Good night.